Yo, what is up, y'all? It's Cone back here again today with another video. We need to talk a little bit about what's happening with the Miami Heat. If you didn't know, right now they're on a 4-game losing streak, 3 of those games to teams that they should not have lost to, and then last night losing to the Brooklyn Nets, who, if the standings stay kind of similar to the way they are now, there's a real chance the Heat and the Nets match up in the first round, and the Heat lost in blowout fashion. Like, the final score, which already looked like a blowout, really didn't indicate quite how uneven the game was. They've been unable to score the ball. They can't stop anyone. They've now fallen out of the first seed in the East behind the Sixers, and the Celtics and Bucks are only half a game behind them. So realistically, if they don't figure things out, they could end up as the 4th seed in what is a stacked Eastern Conference, and that is a huge blow to a team that spent most of the season as the 1 seed while not having their full team. Now that they've kind of got everyone back, they've fallen off a little bit, which is super weird. So let's talk a little bit about what's going on with the Miami Heat, what has happened over the course of this losing streak, and what some of my worries are. Some of y'all might remember, if you're new to this channel, by the way, and you didn't see that video, I made a video about Jimmy Butler and the Miami Heat about a week and a half ago or 2 weeks. Also, if you're new, like and subscribe. But in that video, I talked about how I'm worried about the Heat as a team going forward because I don't know if Jimmy Butler can be that number 1 option on a championship team. Obviously, he had that great run to the bubble, which kind of does show that he can be a 1 option on a finals team. But now his offense is kind of worse than it's been in many years. He can't hit a 3 ball. His efficiency is down across the board. He's super inconsistent. He has a lot of games where he's shooting terrible percentages, like 30, 35% from the field. And in playoff games, especially in a series against a team where no matter who the Heat face in the first round, it's not a gimme. This East is super tough. And so you can't have any of those off nights. And if you do, and a couple of them stack up, you're screwed. So you need your best player to be on his game at all times, especially against some of the elite defenders in the East, like Joel Embiid, Giannis Antetokounmpo, just as 2 examples. The Celtics as a whole team are an elite defense. You've got to be able to score and put the ball in the basket, and the Heat really don't have a guy to go out and do that for them. Maybe there's Tyler Hero, but even he's a little inconsistent, and he's young. Kyle Lowry, they just don't have that scoring superstar that a lot of teams in the Eastern Conference have. Like, once again, Joel Embiid or James Harden, Kevin Durant with the Nets. You've got Giannis Antetokounmpo. You've got Jason Tatum, Jaylen Brown. There are great scorers out there. And even if you can stop them, you've got to be able to put up points yourself, which has been the big problem for the Heat all season. They're a top 5 defense on the year, but a 17th ranked offense, which is not good. This is not what, obviously everyone knew they were going to be more of a defensive team, but this offense is way worse than it should be, or that people kind of expected it to be. And that's really what's happened over the course of this 4-game losing streak, is that teams are scoring like around 110 points, and the Heat cannot keep up. They can't score that much. In these last 4 games, let's go through all of them. The first loss of the 4-game losing streak was against the Sixers, who had no James Harden and no Joel Embiid. So going into it, it kind of looked like, oh, the Sixers, this was on the second half of a back-to-back. The Sixers are just going to rest these guys. They're going to kind of just take the L and move on. But no, they won 113-106. Maxey had 28-5-4. Shake Milton, who's been kind of in and out of the rotation this year, had 25-6. Tobias Harris had 14-8-6. Korkmaz, who once again has been in and out of the rotation, had 18-6-2. Tyler Hero, who, like I said, is someone that they might look at to be one of their best scorers in the playoffs, had just 10 points, only 6 for Duncan Robinson. You did have decent games from Bam Adebayo, Kyle Lowry, and Jimmy Butler. Bam had 22-9, Lowry had 26-6, and Jimmy Butler had 27-5-6. But they only scored 106 points. Their bench has kind of fallen off a little bit. Hero hasn't been quite as good recently, and some of those other guys that have been heroes off their bench, like Max Strus, Gabe Vincent, have been kind of hit or miss. Oladipo's not been having a good year, and so despite that big 3 having a great game, they couldn't stop Maxey, they couldn't stop Shake, they couldn't outscore them, and so they took the L. Next, they faced off against the Warriors, who had no Steph Curry, no Klay Thompson, or no Draymond Green. They give up 118 points. Without Steph, Klay, or Draymond, they only scored 104. And without Draymond Green, the Warriors have not been able to really stop a lot of teams defensively. Didn't matter on this night. Jordan Poole had 30, 22 for Andrew Wiggins, 22 for Damian Lee, 22 for Jonathan Kuminga. They didn't have Hero, which is one thing you can look at, but even so, when you're facing this Warriors team without those 3 guys, you've got to be able to win. And something that I've said a million times on this channel that I stand by every time is that if you want to be an elite team, you've got to be able to win games without your best player. It's just the way it works. In the NBA, there's a lot of injuries, a lot of missed time, a lot of unfair matchups where it's like, oh, like we could beat this team, but we were missing this guy and this guy. You've got to be able to win some of those matchups, and the Heat did not do that. This is also the game where the fighting took place. If you didn't know, Jimmy Butler and Udonis Haslem got up in each other's face. Even Eric Spoelstra and Jimmy Butler were yelling at each other. Eric Spoelstra's like, what do you want me to do? Fight you? Udonis Haslem was saying he was going to kick Jimmy Butler's butt. It was just a lot going on. And this was kind of one of those games where everyone's like, whoa, what's going on? Because there are these two bad losses in a row. And obviously, championship teams, they're going to have these moments of contention where they kind of work to figure things out. And it's obviously frustrating when you lose these type of games. But it was a really heated argument. And so going into their next game against the Knicks, it was a chance for them to kind of turn things around. And for the first three quarters, they were playing great. The Knicks did not have Julius Randle. And going into the fourth quarter, the Heat had, I believe, a 15-point lead and eventually pushed that to 17 points in the fourth quarter. And they lost to a Knicks team without Julius Randle, who hasn't even been that good this season necessarily, but they gave up 111 points, and they scored only 103, blowing a 17-point fourth quarter lead, like I said. RJ had 18, Obi Toppin had 15, 23 from Emmanuel Quickley. Once again, no Tyler Hero, 37-7 from Jimmy, who had a really good game, 17-9 from Bam Adebayo, 17-4-3 from Lowry, but they couldn't close it out against a Knicks team that's in the lottery. They're eliminated from even the play-in at this point, that hasn't been able to score all season. They give up 111 points to them. And that's bad. You can't have that. You can't have games where Jimmy puts together a really good offensive game, but you still give up a 17-point fourth quarter lead. So after those three games, they headed into what was their toughest matchup of this 4-game stretch against the Brooklyn Nets with Kyrie, Kevin Durant, and it was a blowout. Like I said, this is a realistic chance that these two teams match up in the first round if the Heat get back up to that 1 seed, or hell, even if they stay here with the 2 seed and the Nets win their first play-in game. This is a first round matchup. So to see this be a blowout is probably pretty scary for Heat fans. They gave up 110 points and only scored 95, having pretty much their whole team here. KD only had 23, Kyrie only had 11, Drummond, who Bam Adebayo was supposed to like destroy centers and lock them up. Drummond had 13 and 11. He even gave him the peace sign on a breakaway dunk, 17 from Seth Curry. Jimmy shot 1 for 9 with a triple single, 7, 6, and 4. 14 and 6 from Bam Adebayo, who did not take advantage of the lack of size on Brooklyn. 12 from Kyle Lowry, 9 from Oladipo, 13 from Hero, 13 from Strus. It was just no one could score. Bam was their leading scorer with 14 points against a Nets team that isn't known for its defense. So, like I said, on the season, the Heat are the 5th best defense, allowing only 105.2 points per game, but the 17th ranked offense, scoring 109 points per game. So when you look at this stretch of games, they gave up over 110 to every single one of these teams. And for a team that's been holding teams to 105, that's a 5-point increase. If you took this stretch and put it over the course of a season, they're one of the worst defenses in the league, and one of the worst offenses in the league to go along with that. So this has been a really weird stretch for them where they can't guard anyone and they can't score. The scoring's always been a problem, but now it's kind of looking like if the Heat can't lock people up, which in the Eastern Conference playoffs, it's going to be hard to when you face so many great offensive talents like I mentioned, Embiid, Harden, Kevin Durant, Jason Tatum, Giannis, just to name a few names, Zach LaVine and DeMar DeRozan on Chicago. Even if you look at like a Toronto who have Pascal Siakam, Gary Trent Jr., Fred VanVleet, like, there are so many great offensive players in this Eastern Conference. You've got to be able to lock them up, but more importantly, you've got to be able to score. And to see some of these elite defenses that are towards the top, like, for example, the Celtics and Sixers are both also top 5 defenses, or the Sixers are 6, I believe. The Celtics are the best defense in the league. So if you want to beat one of those teams and make it to the finals, you've got to be able to put up points, and I just don't think they can. So at this point, the way I'm looking at the Heat with all these teams out in the East, I'm starting to think the Heat are at best a second-round exit. Obviously, they could put it together and they could make a run, but I just don't know if I trust their offense or trust their defense to be consistent enough to stop some of these great teams. I just don't know if they can do it. Now, with the Nets game, one thing I do want to mention is that Eric Spoelstra was not coaching due to a personal issue, so that could be part of the reason why they lost. But even so, you can't get blown out like that. Like, they lost by 15 points. It was like a 30-point game or like a 25-point game for a lot of this thing. It was not close. So he'd have a lot of problems. There's the fighting, there's the inability to score, there's the inconsistency with their bench, their starting lineup, even when they score a lot, like the bench doesn't contribute, or if the bench really has a good night, Jimmy has an off night, or Bam does. they have a lot of money locked up in this team and they can't seem to put points on the board. I don't know who their first option is. If you have a clutch moment in the playoffs, say you're down 2 and you need to either tie or win the game, you have one possession to go. Who do you give the ball to on this team? Is it Bam? Is it Jimmy? Is it Kyle? Or is it Tyler Hero? Or hell, do you drop a 3 for Duncan Robinson maybe? What do you do? Which of those guys do you give the ball to? And I don't think there's a real great answer there. Jimmy's been inconsistent. Lowry's had some really big playoff moments, but he's also older. Duncan Robinson has been really hit or miss from 3, especially over this recent stretch. Hero is kind of inconsistent. I don't really know who their go-to guy is in those situations, or even in a game where the other team's kind of getting some momentum. Who is the player you give the ball to and say, get out of the way, let this guy start to take over? Because I don't know if there's anyone on this roster that I can consistently see doing that. So the Heat have really big problems and things that I'm super worried about. For most of the season, hell, even coming into the year, I made a video saying that the Heat could win it all because some people didn't think they could. And I still think there is a shot, but they've got to put things together. Over this next stretch, they've got what is not necessarily an easy schedule, but there are a lot of teams on their upcoming schedule that they should beat. They need to get those wins, go with momentum into the playoffs, and figure this thing out. Who is going to be your offensive guy? Even though I don't think there's a great answer, they've got to make a decision on that. So those are some of my thoughts on the Miami Heat. I kind of just want to talk for a bit about this because it's been weird to see this recent stretch losing to so many teams that they shouldn't lose to, and then getting blown out by a team that right now is in the play-in tournament, but that they could realistically face. If it's a Nets Heat first-round series, I think it's a toss-up. With the way that the Nets have been playing, the way that Kyrie and Kevin Durant, the way that the Heat weren't able to stop them at all. I don't know. Let me know what your thoughts are. Am I unnecessarily worried about the Miami Heat? What do you think their ceiling is? I still think they could be a finals team. I mean, you don't have the 1 seed for most of the season and not have a chance to make the finals. I just feel so much less confident about them. If I had to put them in kind of a ranking, I think the Sixers, Bucks, and Celtics are all above them right now in terms of teams that I think could make the finals. So let me know what your thoughts are. I appreciate y'all watching. Make sure to leave a like and subscribe, and I'll see you all later. Real One Say Back.